Have you ever wished you had stayed silent? Wished you hadn't spoken so quickly, hadn't reacted so fast? Just a single pause could have saved a relationship, a peaceful day, or even a part of yourself in a world that constantly demands us to respond, to defend, to prove. I want to bring you back to an ancient but powerful skill, the pause. Not to avoid life, but to master it. Not because you are weak, but because you have grown. Picture this. You're in a tense conversation. A harsh word is thrown your way. Your heart races. Your throat burns. Your mind screams, fight back. But what if you pause? Just 3 seconds. What changes then? Today, we'll explore that tiny pause, the invisible space no one notices, but where true strength begins. Welcome to the art of emotional mastery. The wisdom of Stoicism. ****, reacting fast doesn't make you wiser. Talking more doesn't make you deeper. An impulsive action has never been a sign of strength. If you feel restless, if anger drags you around, if you regret words you've spoken too quickly, this video is for you, because I want to share with you the one practice that transformed my emotional life completely, the art of the pause. Not to delay, but to choose yourself. ***, imagine this. You're in a big meeting. Someone makes a remark that feels like an attack, a subtle insult, an unfair comment. In that instant, fire rushes through you. Your chest tightens, your pulse races. Every part of you shouts, strike back, defend yourself now. But instead, you take a slow, deep breath, and you say nothing. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you choose not to say it yet. That is not weakness. That is strength. The pause is not procrastination. I know in modern life, we feel pressured to react instantly, to answer immediately, to do something right away. But in over 60 years of living and watching people, I've discovered the opposite. True power is found in the ability to stop. Think about it. Have you ever spoken in anger, only to regret it minutes later, wishing you could take it all back? I once had a patient, very successful man, 52 years old, running a large company. One night, stressed and exhausted, he snapped at his 17-year-old son. "You'll never make me proud." One sentence, one impulsive outburst, and their relationship fractured for years. When he told me this story in my office, his voice broke. If I had just paused 5 seconds, I wouldn't have lost my boy. That's the power of a pause. It is not avoidance, it is a conscious choice. A pause is an intentional act. It's when you stop letting instinct control you and let reason guide you instead. Psychologists call this the space between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl spoke of it often. In that space lies our freedom, the freedom to choose how we respond. That response could be silence. It could be a calm smile. It could be nothing more than a slow nod instead of a heavy word that wounds. The Stoics never suppressed emotions. They trained themselves not to be slaves to them. A pause is a decision that gives you freedom. People often ask me, how can I pause when everything happens so fast? I answer with a question of my own. Do you want to be free? Do you want to truly own your life? Because if someone can press a button and make you angry instantly, you are not free. You are being controlled. You are not choosing. You are just reacting. But when you pause, you take back the wheel. You're no longer a car pulled wildly by outside forces. You become the driver, clear and in control of the road ahead. I remember once counseling a 41-year-old woman, divorced, raising her young child alone. She told me, "I don't want to lose my temper with my child anymore. But every time she talks back, I just can't control myself." So we began practicing. The pause, just 3 seconds. When anger rose inside her, she placed her hand over her chest, took a breath, and whispered to herself, "Do I want to teach my child right now, or do I just want to unload my anger?" A few weeks later, she messaged me, "My daughter has started to open up more. She told me she feels like I don't snap at her the way I used to, and I feel more at peace than ever." Do you see? The pause doesn't just prevent you from breaking a relationship, it helps you rebuild yourself. Have you ever tried counting to 5 before replying to a message that upset you? Have you ever gone for a 10-minute walk instead of continuing an argument? Have you ever chosen silence, not because you had nothing to say, but because you wanted to say something that truly mattered? Want to close this part with a reminder from Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, the first deeply admire. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. You have the power to master your thoughts. No one, no circumstance can take that away from you unless you hand it over through an impulsive reaction. So the next time you feel something rising, anger, frustration, hurt, pause. Just for a few seconds, take a breath, place your hand over your heart, and ask yourself, what do I truly want to happen next? That may be the moment you start living with wisdom, not with raw emotion. Silence is not weakness. It is a noble form of strength. It frees us from the chains of unconscious reactions and leads us into the space of wisdom. Think of this moment. You're in an important conversation. The other person, maybe your child, your partner, or a colleague, says something that feels like an insult. A part of you wants to fire back, to prove yourself, to make sure they don't win, and then you remain silent. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you chose silence. For many, silence is mistaken for defeat, for surrender, for weakness. But I'm here to tell you the opposite. The right silence, at the right moment, is one of the highest forms of human strength. I've lived long enough to see this truth. The strongest people are not those who talk the most, argue the best, or speak with the sharpest words. They are the ones who know when to speak and when to stay quiet. I remember a story from Robert, 64, a former client of mine in Boston, a retired soldier, blunt and hot-tempered. He told me one evening at dinner, his daughter-in-law made a critical remark about him in front of the whole family. All eyes turned to him, waiting for his reaction. He said, "I was about to slam the table, to snap back immediately. But then I saw my little grandson's eyes, wide, scared. And suddenly, I kept silent. Not because I was afraid, but because I realized I could destroy this family dinner, or I could let peace hold." That night, he chose the strength of silence. Silence is a language. It says, "I am mature enough not to be ruled by impulse." It says, "I feel my emotions, but they do not own me." And sometimes, silence speaks louder than 100 justifications. In psychology, we call impulsive reactions an amygdala hijack, when the emotional center of the brain takes over before your rational mind has a chance to respond. When you feel insulted, hurt, or your pride is wounded, your brain short-circuits into reaction. But when you choose silence, even for just a few seconds, you interrupt that unconscious chain. You take back the power of choice, and in that very moment, you become free. One thing I often tell my students is this: not everything you feel needs to be spoken. Emotions are real, but they don't always deserve to become actions. I know many of us grew up in environments where silence was mistaken for weakness, where the loudest voice was assumed to be the one that was right. But in truth, silence takes far more courage than shouting, because shouting is easy, reacting is instinct. But holding your calm while a storm rages inside, that is discipline. Think about the person you truly respect in life. Are they the ones who are calm? The ones who make you feel safe in their presence? The ones who don't anger easily, who don't rush to speak? I bet you don't admire them because they won the argument. You admire them because they know when to speak and when to simply smile. I remember a woman named Linda, 58 years old, who once came to a group session I was leading. She said, "I wish I had stayed silent in the last argument I had with my mother before she passed. I just wanted her to understand my point of view. I ended up saying words that hurt her deeply. She died just a few weeks later. And to this day, I still haven't forgiven myself." Do you see? We rarely regret staying silent, but we often regret saying too much. Silence does not mean agreement. It does not mean weakness. It means I choose peace over victory. And more than that, it means I know the kind of person I want to be. I once heard a Zen master say, "Before you speak, let your words pass through 3 gates. The first gate, is it true? The second gate, is it kind? The third gate, is it necessary?" If your words cannot pass through these 3 gates, perhaps silence is the wiser choice. Do not misunderstand silence. It is not the absence of communication. It is the deepest form of communication. Silence opens the path to understanding. It gives others space to hear themselves. And sometimes it gives you the time to realize you don't need to respond at all. Are you in a situation right now where you feel you must say something, but your heart longs for peace? Try silence. Place your hand on your heart and ask, am I speaking to understand, or am I speaking to win? If the answer is to win, choose silence. Silence is not the absence of strength. It is strength refined. The strength of someone who knows what truly matters. The strength of someone who does not need to shout to be heard. The strength of someone who understands. Wisdom does not grow in noise. It blossoms in stillness. A mature person learns this truth. Not reacting is also a reaction. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is nothing until you truly understand what is happening. Think back to the last time you said something, and 5 minutes later, you wished you hadn't. We've all been there, haven't we? And in those moments, a phrase always echoes in my mind: not reacting is also a reaction. We grow up in a world that encourages us to always act, always respond, always give an opinion, and to do it quickly. But do you know what I've learned after decades of working with adults? That the truly mature, the truly strong, are often those who know when not to act. I'm not talking about indifference. No. I'm talking about self-mastery, invisible strength that comes from choosing the right moment to respond, or even not to respond at all. I remember a man, his name was William, 57 years old, once the head of HR at a tech company. In one session, he told me about a stormy meeting where a young employee openly criticized his decision in front of the entire room. Everyone turned to him, waiting for his reaction. And he did the most surprising thing. He said nothing. He simply looked at the young man, nodded, jotted a few notes in his notebook, and calmly moved on to the next subject. A week later, the same employee walked into his office, apologized, and admitted he had acted THOUGHTLESSLY. William hadn't won an argument. He had chosen not to step into a fight that didn't need to happen. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is nothing at all. Not answering right away. Not trying to explain. Not getting pulled into someone else's emotional storm. Just holding your ground in stillness. And I know that's hard. Because our instinct, especially when misunderstood or hurt, is to do something to regain our balance. But here's the truth. In many cases, not reacting is the only way to protect the noblest part of yourself. Stoicism teaches us it's not what happens to you that determines the quality of your life. It's how you respond. And sometimes, the wisest response is no response at all. I once worked with a woman named Maria, 48 years old, a single mother, smart, resilient. After her divorce, her ex-husband would often send cruel, cutting messages, attacking her as a mother. At first, she replied long texts, sometimes angry, sometimes defensive. And then one day, she decided to try something different. She didn't respond. She didn't engage. She didn't react. Instead, she wrote her feelings down on paper, read them back, and then tore them up. Weeks later, she looked at me and said, "I've never felt so strong. I thought I had to reply to defend my honor, but silence was what truly protected my peace." You see, not reacting isn't passivity. It's actively keeping yourself in awareness. It's standing still in the river's current, watching, observing, choosing, instead of being swept away. I often compare it to driving through a heavy storm. Rain pelts your windshield, blinding your view. You could slam the accelerator, swerve recklessly, trying to power through in panic. Or you could pull over, turn on your hazard lights, and wait a few minutes. When the storm eases, you continue your journey, safer, clearer, wiser. Not reacting is the emotional equivalent of pulling over. You're not abandoning the road. You're waiting for the storm of emotion to pass before making a better choice. Yes, silence or inaction can sometimes make others think you're weak. But my friend, true strength isn't reacting immediately. True strength is knowing exactly what you're doing and why. Real power doesn't lie in the reaction itself. It lies in the ability to choose your reaction. And I want to ask you this honestly. How many times in your life have you done something purely because emotion pushed you and later regretted it? We've all had those moments. And that's why I believe the ability not to react immediately is one of the most valuable life skills, especially as you enter the more mature stages of life. Not reacting doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care at the right time, in the right way, and for the right reason. It means you place clarity above performance. It means you know what deserves your energy and what deserves to be left alone. In a world where people speak too quickly, judge too hastily, and react out of habit, the person who can pause, stay silent, and wait until they truly understand, that is the person walking the path of wisdom, and sometimes doing nothing at all, is the strongest response you can give. The pause is the space where your personal values reflect back at you. In that moment, you don't just react out of emotion, you act out of who you want to become. So let me ask you something. Today, not about work, not about family, but about you. When you react to a situation, what are you really expressing? Are you expressing a temporary emotion? Or are you expressing the kind of person you want to be? Throughout my career in philosophy-based counseling and therapy, I've sat with hundreds of adults who have said things like, "That wasn't really me. I just lost control for a moment." Or, I don't know why I reacted that way. I wish I had handled it differently. And I understand. Because in the heat of emotion, anger, hurt, jealousy, we tend to react by instinct. But here's the painful truth. Those reactions shape how others see us. And over time, even we start to doubt ourselves. Who am I, really? That's why the pause matters so much. When you stop even for just a few seconds, you create space for something priceless to emerge. Your values, not your fleeting emotions. Not your need to win, but the deeper question. What kind of person do I want to be in this moment? I remember in a group session, a man named Richard, 2 years old, retired after years as a teacher, shared something with us. He said he often lost his temper with his son. I taught hundreds of kids over 30 years, he said, and yet, with my one son, I lose patience so easily. I asked him, if that boy weren't your son, but one of your students in class, how would you respond? He sat silently for a while, then sighed. I would be more patient. I would ask questions. I would listen. And in that moment he realized his reactions weren't coming from his true self. They were coming from emotions. He hadn't learnt to pause. He had forgotten to ask himself, what kind of father do I want to be? Do you see? The pause is not just a time to calm down. It's a mirror. A space where you see yourself more clearly and ask, will my next action reflect the person I'm trying to become? I believe that the older we grow, the clearer we understand one truth. Dignity doesn't come from reaction, it comes from choice, and the right choice rarely arrives in haste. It comes when you allow yourself a pause. Have you ever had this experience like I have? When you reacted out of hurt, but a few hours later, you wished you had chosen kindness instead. Or when you said something just to protect your pride only, to realize you had lost respect in the process. That is when the pause was missed. When emotions spoke first, and values were left behind. On the other hand, when you pause and turn inward, you give yourself the chance to choose based on what truly matters to me. Am I living in alignment with the values I want to uphold? Am I showing up as the person I want my children, my partner, my colleagues to remember me as? A study at Stanford University revealed something powerful. Those who can delay their reaction in emotionally charged situations tend to make wiser choices. And they also report greater satisfaction in their relationships. And why is that? Because they act from awareness, not from impulse. I once wrote a script on this very topic, and later received an email from a woman thanking me. She said, I used to react too quickly to my mother-in-law. I always felt the need to snap back whenever she said something unpleasant. But after hearing your words, I tried pausing for just 3 seconds. I asked myself, do I really need to reply? And then I chose to smile. The atmosphere at home has felt lighter ever since. That tiny pause, though small, was a revolution within her. It was her way of declaring to herself, I am the one who chooses my response. I act from my values, not from fleeting emotions. Try this today. The next time you feel triggered by anger, by hurt, by disappointment, don't speak right away. Instead, ask yourself, who do I want to be in this moment? And then act as if you already are that person. The quality of your life is directly proportional to the quality of your responses. Every word, every action born from stillness plants the seed for a stronger, more enduring life. I once sat with a man 58 years old, living in California, who had worked as a firefighter for over 25 years. Most people think that profession is all about technical skill, about reacting quickly to danger. And of course, it is. But he told me something fascinating. The greatest thing I learned in 25 years wasn't how to outrun a fire. It was how to keep my mind calm when everyone else was panicking. He looked at me, shrugged, and said, "Where there is calm, there is survival." That line has stayed with me for years. I believe that what he said is not only true in his line of work, but in every aspect of life. Marriage, parenting, work, self-care, all of it depends on how you respond in difficult moments. We cannot control everything that happens to us. Life is unpredictable. You cannot prevent someone from misunderstanding you. You cannot stop a message from hurting you. You cannot stop a bad day from arriving uninvited, but you can choose your response. And that choice defines the quality of your life. I know some people will say, "I can't control my emotions." And I believe them because emotions come naturally. But what I am talking about here is not controlling emotions. It is choosing your response. You can feel anger without shouting. You can feel hurt without hurting someone else. You can feel disappointment while still showing respect. I remember a woman named Nancy, 45 years old, who came to me because her relationship with her mother was breaking down. "Every time she criticizes me, I explode," she said, "and then I cry afterward because I regret it." I asked her, "Does your reaction change anything?" She shook her head. "Then what do you want the quality of that relationship to look like?" She sat in silence for a long while, then said, "I want peace more than I want victory." From that day, Nancy began practicing something simple, pausing before reacting. She learned to breathe first, then respond from a deeper place within herself. Over time, the atmosphere at home softened, and one day she told me, "It's not that my mother changed, I changed. And when I changed, my world changed with me." We cannot demand that life always be gentle, but we can choose how we walk through the difficult moments. The reactions you choose today are the seeds of the life you will harvest tomorrow. A kind word instead of a harsh one can preserve a relationship. A nod instead of an argument can save an evening of peace. A pause to listen instead of rushing to judge can help you understand someone more deeply. When I was younger, I used to think happiness was about the good things that happened in life. A good job, a vacation, an unexpected sum of money. But the longer I live, the more I realize happiness does not lie in circumstances. It lies in how you respond to them. You can live in an ordinary house with the ordinary worries of life. But if you respond with gratitude, calm, and wisdom, your life will be richer than that of many who seem to have everything, yet cannot manage their own emotions. The quality of your response equals the quality of your life. That is not a cliché. It is a truth I have seen repeated through every client, every story, every life. So I want to invite you to try this today. The next time something bothers you, instead of reacting immediately, pause. Ask yourself, where do I want the quality of my life to go? Will this reaction bring me closer to the person I want to become? Remember this, you cannot build a happy life on unconscious reactions. You must act from a place of awareness, and that space always begins with a pause. The pause is an opportunity to look inward, not to judge others. Most anger comes from wounds within us that have not yet healed. Have you ever been angry at someone, only to realize later you were the one left exhausted? I have, and I'm certain you have too. We often think we're angry because someone did something wrong, said something hurtful, disrespected us, or caused us pain. But after many years of working in emotional therapy, I've learned this. Anger doesn't always come from the outside. It often comes from within. And the moment we pause, instead of reacting immediately, that is the very moment we're invited to look deeper inside ourselves. The pause isn't for listing the faults of others. It isn't for holding grudges. It is for observing what is truly happening within you. I remember a session with James, a 60-year-old father, a widower, living with his eldest son. He told me, every time he talks back to me, I lose it. I feel disrespected, like I have no value left in my own home. I asked him, are you truly angry at your son's words? Or are you angry because you feel unseen, less valued than before? He sat in silence for a long time. Then he said, quietly, maybe, I'm not angry at him. Maybe I'm angry because I feel I'm being left behind. That was a moment of awakening. Not every anger is caused by what others do wrong. Often, it is the voice of an old wound within us, calling out for healing. The pause is where you begin to face that deeper part of yourself. When you're about to raise your voice, about to react, about to place blame, stop. Ask yourself, what am I really angry about? What am I trying to protect inside myself? Am I asking someone else to fill a void that I haven't healed within me? We don't get angry because of a single comment. We get angry because of the wound beneath that comment. Someone may say something offensive, but you only feel rage if those words touch a part of you that hasn't been resolved. It might be fragile self-worth. It might be old childhood pain. It might be a sense of being undervalued for so long that you've never admitted it. I once worked with a woman named Susan, 50 years old, who had been criticized harshly by her father throughout her youth. Even though she had become a successful businesswoman, she still lost control whenever someone offered her feedback. One day, a colleague gently suggested she could delegate her tasks more effectively. Susan exploded inside. She drafted an angry email within the first 5 minutes. But this time, before hitting send, she paused. She took a deep breath, deleted the entire reply, and opened her notebook instead. She wrote, "Why am I reacting so strongly to this?" And the answer surfaced, "Because I can still hear my father's voice from years ago telling me I was never good enough." Do you see? It wasn't the feedback that made her angry. It was the unhealed memory behind it, and the pause gave her the clarity to see it. When you pause, you're not just avoiding an argument. You're giving yourself the chance to listen to your own heart. You're bringing light into the darker corners of your inner world, those parts often neglected because you've been too busy reacting. I always remind my students of this. A person who often gets angry is not a bad person. A person who often gets angry is someone trying to protect something fragile inside themselves. And the sad truth is, the more we try to protect with anger, the further we drift from healing. That's why the pause is a gift you give to yourself. It isn't passivity. It isn't swallowing it down. It's a profound act of intention to stop and ask, what am I really reacting to? How do I want to act so that my response reflects the strong and peaceful person within me? Imagine if you practiced this every day. Instead of arguing back, you ask, what do I truly need right now? Instead of snapping in irritation, you breathe and journal for 3 minutes. Instead of yelling at your child, you hug them and ask, are you upset about something? You could transform not only your own life, but also the lives of those around you, because anger spreads like fire, but understanding spreads like light, and that light begins with a pause. The pause isn't about judging others. It's the chance to become a healer for yourself. And do you know what happens when you begin to heal? You stop reacting so quickly. You stop needing to prove yourself. You begin to respond with understanding instead of from your wounds. A pause doesn't just save relationships, it saves you. A careless word can leave a scar that lasts for years. Have you ever said something in anger and just minutes later wished you could take it all back? I think you have. I know I have. And I still remember that feeling the moment, right? After the words leave your lips, when your heart feels hollow, regretful, and too late, we often believe words are weightless, shapeless, without form. But you know what? Words are the very things that leave the deepest wounds. I once met a woman named Carol, 53 years old, divorced for 8 years, who hadn't spoken to her only daughter for more than 2 years. I asked her why. Through tears, she answered, just one sentence, only one, in anger. I told her, I wish I had never given birth to you, and from that day, she never called me again. Do you see? One sentence, spoken in a moment of lost control, can create a distance longer than 1,000 miles. That is why I want to emphasize this to you today. The pause doesn't just save relationships, saves you. It saves you from regret. It saves you from loss. It saves you from living with the haunting words, if only. Most conflicts in life don't come from disagreement. They come from how we react to disagreement. You don't need to agree with others in order to keep peace, but you do need to learn how not to let emotions destroy connection. The moment you pause right before reacting is the moment you place your hand back on the steering wheel. You can turn toward kindness or crash into conflict. Those who never pause let their emotions drive their lives, but those who know how to pause let their values, compassion, and wisdom take the wheel. I remember a story from an old friend of mine. He was once a CEO in the finance world. One time, an employee made a costly mistake that hurt the company. Everyone expected him to explode in anger, but instead, he was silent. He exhaled, and then he said, I was once new to next time. Just don't hide your mistakes. No one forgot that moment. Not because he scolded, but because he chose to respond with kindness instead of anger. I am not saying you must always be unconditionally gentle. No. What I'm saying is this: when you pause, you give yourself the chance to choose the best within you. You don't need to win an argument if the price is distance. You don't need to speak the truth if that truth is delivered with cruelty. You don't need to teach someone a lesson if that lesson shatters their heart. You can pause to listen, to understand, to place a hand on their shoulder instead of pointing a finger at their flaws. People may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And often, the wisest response comes after a conscious pause. I once witnessed a couple, 20 years married, nearly divorced simply because they reacted faster than they thought. The wife said, "You never care about me." The husband snapped back, "Because you're not worth caring about." Then they looked at each other and knew they had crossed a line. All because neither of them paused. If just one of them, only one, had stopped before reacting, everything could have been different. The pause is the mark of a mature soul, one who understands that words don't just communicate thoughts, they leave an imprint on another person's heart. So if today you feel yourself about to say something in anger, remember this: every word is like a stone. You can use it to build a bridge, you can throw it and break one. The pause helps you choose to be the builder, My friend, we cannot take back the words we've spoken, but we can hold them in that one small moment before they leave our lips and replace them with something kinder, truer, and more healing. The pause saves you, not by keeping you silent forever, but by giving you the time to choose which words are truly worth speaking. And when you choose well, you don't just preserve a relationship, you preserve the peace within your own soul. The person who cannot be easily provoked is the strongest one in the room. Self-control does not mean the absence of emotion, it means knowing how to guide emotion at the right time. Have you ever met someone whose presence alone seemed to calm the entire room? They didn't need to speak loudly. They didn't need to prove themselves. Simply by being there, everyone seemed to know, this is the person we should listen to. They don't react too quickly. They don't anger too easily. They don't get pulled into negative energy, not because they have no emotions, but because they've learned how to direct their emotions instead of being controlled by them. I remember working with a retired military officer. His name was Jonathan. In his 60s, I asked him, what makes a soldier truly reliable on the battlefield? He answered instantly, without hesitation, it's the one who doesn't panic when provoked. The one who stays calm when the gunfire starts, when insults are thrown, when the plan falls apart. And then he said something I'll never forget. If someone else can make you angry easily, you haven't just lost your temper, you've lost your freedom. Do you see? We are not strong because emotions never appear. We are strong because we refuse to let emotions control our actions. I once had a student, a woman, 47 years old, working as a manager in education. She told me, I'm quick-tempered. Every time a student doesn't do their work, I get furious. When colleagues criticize me, I lose sleep. I feel like I'm being controlled by every small action of others. We began working on one crucial concept, the space between stimulus and response. In that space, where the emotion has already risen but you have not yet reacted, lies your freedom. She started practicing the pause. Instead of snapping at students, she took a breath. Instead of reacting harshly to colleagues, she wrote her feelings down. Instead of reacting immediately, she chose a deliberate response. 3 months later, she told me, I no longer feel drained by other people. I feel in control, and she smiled. Now I understand, strength is staying calm when everyone else is losing control. In Stoic philosophy, there is a famous saying, the person who makes you angry is the one who controls you. And most of us don't realize this. Every time you react because you've been insulted, provoked, or misunderstood, you are handing over the steering wheel of your emotions to someone else. But if you are not easily provoked, not easily triggered, you become the strongest person in the room. Not because you pretend to be cold, but because you know who you are, and no one can take that calm from you unless you allow it. My friend, I know staying calm is not always easy, especially when you are slandered, insulted, or treated unfairly. I've been there too, but I learned something. No one can touch the peace within you unless you open the door and let them in. Self-control does not mean you see nothing. It means you see very clearly, but still choose to act from wisdom, not from reflex. That is inner strength, a silent, steady power, the kind that earns respect, not because of authority, but because of your grounded presence. I want you to imagine this. The next time someone tries to shake your calm with sarcasm, with disrespect, with provocation, instead of snapping back, you pause, you smile, you stay silent. You don't need to win the argument, because you've already won over yourself, And do you know what? It is that silent restraint that others truly respect. Not because you were afraid, but because you were too strong to need to prove anything. In this world, anyone can yell, anyone can get angry, but very few can remain calm. If you can do that, to hold one of the rarest strengths of a mature soul, a single deep breath can change the course of an entire conversation. It is the buffer that lets reason step in before emotion takes over. Now picture this. You're in a conversation with your partner. Tension rises. A small misunderstanding turns into a heated dialogue. You feel the heat rising to your face. Your chest tightens. Your hands begin to tremble. And you know, just one uncontrolled word could send things too far. But instead of speaking, you take a deep breath. Slow, steady, conscious. And with that single breath, everything shifts. Breath is always with you, yet it's the thing you forget the most. In those moments when you feel cornered by your emotions, anger, hurt, anxiety, you often react before you even realize you are alive. But just one intentional breath is enough to bring you back to yourself. I once worked with a physician, head of a busy emergency room in Chicago. He told me, "I don't have time to meditate, but I practice deep breathing every time my heart starts to race." I asked him why. He smiled and said, "Because if I react to the rhythm of my racing heart, I'll yell at the nurses, blame the patients, or make the wrong decision. But if I breathe, I remember who I am, and I don't need to let panic define me." Do you see? A single deep breath is not a small thing. It is how you tell your brain, "I am safe." And when the emotion no longer feels like a threat, reason can return. Breath is the bridge between instinct and wisdom, between ego and kindness, between reflex and freedom. Each time you take a deep breath, you create the buffer that allows you to choose a wiser response. I still remember a time I almost lost a close friendship over a text message. My best friend sent me a line that made me feel disrespected. Emotions surged. I grabbed my phone and typed a harsh reply, but then I paused. I put the phone down. I took a breath, and I didn't reply, at least. Not for the next 24 hours. The next day, I learned he hadn't meant it the way I took it. He was simply stressed by family issues. And I thought, if not for that one breath, I might have lost a friend of 15 years. I know you've had moments like that too. Moments where just 1 second of pause changed the entire direction of your life. We are never taught how to breathe. We are taught how to react, to answer quickly, to fire back, to win the argument. But here's the paradox. Real strength lives in the pause, and breath is the doorway that leads you there. There is one question I always carry with me. Am I speaking because it is true, or because I need to release my emotion? If it's emotion, I breathe. If it's truth, I choose my words with intention. Because I believe this: not everything that is true needs to be spoken, especially if it is spoken from a heart on fire. You can try this today. The next time you're in the middle of an argument, or when you feel wounded, instead of answering, take a deep breath, not to avoid, but to listen to yourself before saying something that will live on forever. Because words once spoken can never be taken back, but breath can stop them from being spoken. Sometimes the only thing standing between a healing conversation and a broken one is a single intentional breath. Do not underestimate it. Breath doesn't just calm the body, it opens the way for wisdom to appear. It reminds you of the most important truth. Who do I want to be in this moment? You don't need to win every conversation. You only need to show up as the best version of yourself. And often, the best things begin after a single deep breath. Silence is the doorway to understanding. When you pause long enough, you don't just hear others, you begin to hear yourself. I want you to picture something simple. You're sitting with someone you love. It might be your partner. It might be your child. It might be your parent. You've just argued. The air is heavy. You feel the urge to speak, to explain, to defend, to protect your pride. But then, you don't speak. You choose silence. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you are listening. And in that space where there are no words, no debates, something deeper begins to unfold. Do you see? Silence is not the absence of words. It is the full presence of understanding. We live in a world where everyone wants to speak, but very few know how to listen. Where everyone wants to be right, but so few ask, does being right bring healing? I once asked a middle-aged man, do you want to be right, or do you want a good relationship? He laughed awkwardly and said, I think I've sacrificed many relationships just to win the argument. Silence does not mean abandoning your perspective. Silence is an invitation, an opening for something deeper to emerge. Have you noticed? When you are silent, you finally begin to hear the emotions behind someone's words. Behind anger is often fear. Behind criticism is often the longing to be understood. Behind harsh words is often a heart trying to reach out clumsily, imperfectly, but sincerely. I remember once counseling a married couple. They hadn't spoken to each other for 3 weeks. Each of them carried a list of things they wanted to make the other understand. But when they entered the room, I simply asked them to sit in silence for 2 minutes. No talking, just looking at each other, just breathing. When the 2 minutes were over, the wife broke down in tears, and she said, I don't need you to explain. I just want you to sit beside me like this, every day. Sometimes, understanding doesn't come from explanation. It comes from presence. Silence is the space where you stop trying to define everything and instead allow things to reveal themselves in their truest form. In silence, you see more clearly what is really happening inside you. You don't just hear others, you finally begin to hear yourself. Have you ever been in an argument where you suddenly realized you weren't actually angry at the other person, you were angry at yourself? Not because they said something wrong, but because you felt unseen, unheard, and then you fell silent. And in that silence, you realized the pain didn't need to be argued with, it needed to be embraced. I believe this: we don't need to speak more. We need to understand more deeply, and deep understanding rarely comes through words. It comes through presence, through eye contact, through not interrupting, through simply breathing together. In Stoic philosophy, there is a simple yet powerful teaching: we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Epictetus, are you in a tense relationship right now? Are you holding on to something you feel you need to say and settle? Try something different. Don't speak. Just be silent. And listen, not to agree, not to endure, but to understand what truly needs to be healed between you. Silence is not weakness. Silence is the strength of one who has learned to see beyond words. Silence is the mirror that reflects the mind. It is where you are no longer dragged by another person's emotions. It is where you remember, I don't need to say everything I think. I only need to hold on to what truly matters. In a world where people so often speak too quickly, judge too hastily, and react out of habit, The one who can pause, remain silent, and wait until they truly understand, is the one walking the path of wisdom. Have you ever walked into a meeting, a group discussion, or even a family dinner, and noticed that everyone was rushing to speak, each one eager to jump in, each one defending something, no one truly listening, and then there's one person, silent, not interrupting, not overexpressing, just watching, listening, observing, and strangely enough, is that quiet presence that begins to command everyone's attention. We live in a world of reflex. Reflex to answer, reflex to defend, a viewpoint, reflex to prove we're right. But the older I get, the more I see. Wisdom does not live in the speed of reaction, but in the quality of presence. I once worked with a man named Gary, 55 years old, who had practiced law for over 30 years. He was known for reacting quickly. In meetings, sharp, argumentative, even a little overpowering. One day, after a heated argument with his teenage daughter, he came to me and sighed. I won the argument, but I lost her trust. After a few sessions, he began practicing something very simple. Pause before answering. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he wanted his words to come from understanding, not from reflex. 3 months later, he returned and told me, silence gave me something reflex never could, gravity. When I spoke less, my daughter listened more. The right silence has an undeniable pull. It makes others listen to you, not because you speak loudly, but because you speak with depth. Those who talk too much often lose weight in their words. But those who speak after truly understanding, those who dare to pause before responding, they give every word a lasting impact. Do you see? You don't need to respond to everything right away. You don't need to take a stance in every debate. You don't always need to have the right answer. What you need is to be deeply present, present enough to truly listen, both to others and to yourself. When I was young, I thought the smart person was the one who always had an answer. But as I grew older, I realized the truly wise are those strong enough to stay silent when they don't yet understand, and calm enough to wait until their words are truly worth speaking. In Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The wise man speaks because he has something to say. The fool speaks because he has to say something." Think about the person you truly respect in your life. I'd guess it isn't the one who always had the fastest reply in the room. It's the one who knew how to hold a pause before responding. The one who made you want to listen because when they finally spoke, you knew their words had passed through layers of reflection, experience, and understanding. Slowness in response is not weakness, it is depth. It is the discipline of choosing your reflexes carefully, ensuring your mouth does not outrun your heart and your wisdom. You don't always need to have an answer right away. Silence itself can be a deeply intelligent response. Now, imagine this. You're sitting in a meeting. Someone has just asked a difficult question. All eyes turn to you. You feel the urge to respond immediately, to show that you know, to prove that you have an opinion, but you're not sure. You need more time to think. And then you hear that familiar voice inside whispering, "I have to say something right now." So you speak, and what comes out is half-formed, uncertain, or worse, something that doesn't even reflect who you really are. Have you ever been in that situation? I believe you have, because society teaches us that quick responses are a sign of intelligence. But here's the truth. The one who replies fastest is not always the one who understands best. And the person who stays silent in that moment may be preparing to speak words that others will remember forever. I had a patient once. Her name was Sharon, 61 years old, a former high school principal. Throughout her career, she was always the one to make quick decisions at work, in meetings, in conflicts. But in her personal life, she often found herself speaking too soon and regretting it later. One day she told me, "I know I'm intelligent, but why is it that every time I react too quickly, I feel out of control?" I smiled and replied with a question. Who told you that you have to have an answer right away? Silence is the answer. Sometimes it's the only answer true wisdom chooses. In Stoic philosophy, there is a clear principle. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Marcus Aurelius, which means you don't need to control everything. You only need to control how you respond to everything. And the first step to control is to pause. I once watched a father 45 years old say something powerful to his son. "I don't need to answer you right now, but I promise I will think about it carefully." The boy wasn't upset. He nodded and smiled. Because in that delayed response, there was respect, there was depth, and there was love. As adults, we often forget one thing. It's not quick answers that make us wise. It's the right answers that matter. And to give the right answer, we need time, space, and the courage to wait. Are you tired of always feeling like you must decide instantly? Do you feel anxious when someone asks you a question you're not ready to answer? Then hear this. You have the right to say, "I'm not ready to answer. I need more time. Let me think this through." There is no shame in not having an immediate answer. What's truly regrettable is giving an answer you don't believe in. And you know what? Psychological research shows this. People who delay their emotional reactions even by just 5 to 10 seconds to make better decisions, carry fewer regrets, and sustain healthier relationships. It's true, just a short pause can change everything. So imagine this. In a heated conversation, you pause for 3 seconds. You take a deep breath. You look into the other person's eyes, and you say, "I'm listening. I just need more time to sit with this." You don't just avoid saying something regrettable. You create a safe space where the other person can simply be themselves. And this matters most in love, in parenting, in partnerships, in work, where every word has the power to build trust or break it. So you don't need to have an answer right away. The answer can come later, and when it comes, it will carry the weight of wisdom, experience, and love. My dear friend, strength is not in shouting louder, reacting faster, or winning every conversation. Strength is in pausing, in taking one deep breath when emotions rise, in choosing peace over ego, in answering from understanding rather than from hurt. Stoicism teaches us this. You cannot control the world, but you can control yourself. And the moment you learn to pause is the moment you stop reacting by instinct